Hey there, everyone. Excited to be back, especially with this team, not only because of our pre-show dialogue and the amazing amount of espresso we've all been drinking this morning, but because we really get to dig in and look at unlocking and unleashing your high-performance network for digital transformation. Let me introduce our panel of experts who are going to be sharing this session with us today. First up, I do have Richard Piezentine, who is Chief Marketing and Chief Strategy Officer of Acedian. Also with me, Tim DeWaren, Senior Director, Solution Marketing from Infinera, and Matt Ringhofer, Director of Technical Services, Service Assurance for InfoVista. Gentlemen, nice to see you all, and thank you so much for being with us. So how about this, if it's all right? I would simply appreciate you all kind of sharing maybe a word about the professional role in your organization before we kind of jump right in. So why don't we start? Actually, Richard, you could start off, then we'll go with Tim and Matt for a quick word.
Sure. Thank you very much, John. And I just want to say, thank you very much to my co-panelists here and to everybody listening. Great opportunity here to speak in this MEF forum. So Richard Piezentine, I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for Acedian. I also happen to be the Chief Marketing Officer. And I like to tell people I've got the best job in the whole wide world. Why? Well, because I get to, basically fly around the world, although unfortunately not right now, and talk to customers not only about where they are today, but most importantly, where they're going to be in the next 3 years. And then as a trusted partner, Acedian develops the solutions that our customers need long-term, so both in terms of their current operations, but most importantly, what they're going to be doing in the future. And then I get to come back and with my product teams and my marketing teams, turn that vision, that challenge that our customers pose, and turn that into the products, services, and materials and digital presence that Acedian is. So, again, I'm really excited to be here, and thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks again, John, for the introduction, and Richard, great job, and also great to be with you here, Matt. Tim DeWaren from Infinera. I run the solutions marketing team for Infinera for our whole portfolio, which includes optical networking, disaggregated routing, and intelligent software automation. The last several months, I too have been homebound, if you will, and not traveling, and looking forward to getting back on the road whenever we get this behind us. At Infinera, we're building intelligent and innovative network infrastructure solutions every day to help service providers keep pace with both the capacity and bandwidth demands, but also the changes and the transformations that are happening in the network and in the services that they're deploying. Thanks a lot. Great to be here, guys.
Thanks, John. Richard, Tim, great to be with you both. I know you're both experts in the industry. My role at InfoVista is a little different than both, but where I really work with our teams of architecture consulting, our solution consulting group, directly interfacing with R&D and product. I lead and direct the technology services group for the Americas. And specifically where I focus is our service assurance product lines and UPM products. So I work with our customers, really trying to ensure that their services are fulfilled, they're meeting exactly what the customers are expecting. But we're on the leading edge of that technology. So working with MEF and other organizations, we really can shape and mold how these services are delivered, what those expectations are. And with those interfaces with our back-end groups, I have a great job of being able to fulfill some of those needs for our customers and being able to see our company accelerate.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate you all kind of sharing. And I'll pose this question to the three of you as well. You can all chime in and make a comment. I'll probably this. We'll go backwards. So we'll start with Matt, who just finished up, and then go to Tim and then Richard. But we understand, digital transformation provides, a reshaping of how an entire business operates. But what would you say are technical challenges, are enterprises and communication service providers? How are they facing these? What are they faced with, I should say?
Yeah, thanks, John. So, I think one of the major challenges is they've taken what was years of planning and they've accelerated that in a timeline of months for deployment. And what that's caused is major issues with the experimentation cycles and pilot phases of rolling out solutions. And that major challenge really comes in the ability to use standards and interoperable systems. Where that gap really is divided is their legacy systems into new technologies. So I see that as one of the major gaps. I see other two others, which is going to be more security related, and that's going to be in the cloud. So cloudification is prevalent, and there's major security concerns because it's a shared resource, and whenever you're sharing all this data, you're going to have that problem. And then the third probably being big data. And big data is really something that people are evolving to, but those legacy systems don't necessarily have data in the right places. They have lots of data. They don't know what to do with it. So trying to consolidate that and make it meaningful is an ever-existing challenge.
I would just add to that kind of the at a macro level, service providers are trying to go faster and offer additional new revenue generating services while at the same time dealing with the capacity demands that are continuing to exist on the network. And so what I see generally is the move toward disaggregated and open, and at the same time having to make sure that all works together and make sure there's enough automation and capabilities so that the service providers can keep up with the pace of capacity demands and the new services, and at the same time, build the networks they need to support all of that going forward in the future.
I have just a couple of thoughts to add on to what Tim and Matt mentioned earlier. Here at Exedian, we serve both enterprises and service providers, and I know this audience is predominantly service provider, but one of the things that we see is not only is there a digital transformation challenge, which the gentleman already articulated, but there's also a convergence of the challenges between enterprise. If you look at the job of an enterprise CIO today, dealing with complex legacy infrastructure, trying to manage a CI/CD pipeline of DevOps for certain applications, but then deliver that across legacy and modern infrastructure. If you look at those challenges, and then you look at the challenges of a modern CTO inside of a service provider who's trying to deploy, by the way, he or she is operating a network that probably spans 15 to 20 years of infrastructure, and at the same time has to introduce the most complex open, to Tim's point earlier, open architectures, and to lean a little bit on what Matt said, manage all of it with security as job one right up front. Those challenges are unprecedented and they're very common, it's a challenge, but clearly the opportunity is rapid, more velocity in time to market, more velocity in terms of revenue, and obviously increased end user and client satisfaction with challenges.
Thank you, Richard, and thanks for all kind of chiming in on that. Matt, I'm going to direct this towards yourself. If you could kind of dig into, tell me about some of the leading technologies that are really emerging when we look at, I would say, both the acute and chronic conditions of today's transformation strategies.
Sure. Well, I could
What's
make this pretty long.
Okay.
You bet. I think all of us can agree that cloudification and many other services like AI, ML, blockchain, these are all chronic developments within digital transformation, and they were meant to be a transformative technology. And some of them have been rapidly accelerated, and more specifically, obviously cloudification, but SD-WAN and SASE, 5G fixed wireless for remote workers. As everybody has begun working from their home offices, in this 2020 year, the workforce is mobile. The technologies have had to shift, and that's more of an acute change to that chronic condition where people were moving their transformation. But where I find some anomalies are things like analytics. And where I find that one to be interesting is it's actually shifted backwards, in my opinion, and what I've seen from many of our customers, because if you were to use analytics and modeling from AI and ML from 2019, you certainly wouldn't have a very good result in 2020 because the models don't work. So what we've seen is an actual shift from using data in a different way, using more real-time type data to make actionable intelligence and decisions by real people. So although some of these are meant to be chronic, they have been accelerated into this sort of acute realm and year, but there's also ones that have actually gone backwards.
I'll pick up on your machine learning for just a second, which is, at one point, I think, we all had a vision that we could get rapidly or in a reasonable amount of time to full closed loop automation and derive lots of intelligence from that. From the data. We're obviously all pursuing that, and that's a piece of it. But I think one of the things we've learned is the trust factor in terms of service providers need to trust that the algorithms and the data that's coming out and being derived is actually meaningful and helpful. And so we've seen an increased desire for dashboards and recommendations, all on the journey to a more closed loop automated network. But this is going to have to take time, and it's going to have to evolve as we build trust in what the recommendations and what the dashboards are saying on that journey. Just one point I'd pick up on that you mentioned.
Really interesting conversation. At Exedian, I love Matt's reference to analytics, right? It's analytics everywhere. It's real-time analytics, and it's analytics that are fit for purpose. I think, there's a maturing in at least the marketplace that Exedian is serving around not trying to solve world hunger in the construct of the AI implementations and ML implementations inside of the enterprise or the service provider, and being very, very focused. And it ties to the comments that Tim was making around that trust factor. So, if you can imagine in your mind the make it so button, right? And, closed loop automation ultimately is that you don't have to push the button. The network does it itself, or the system does it itself. But right now, those implementations have a make it so button, right? The people side of the equation makes the decision to execute. One of the things that Exedian feels is incredibly important in building that trust, but also delivering the fit for purpose analytics, is the idea that you have to remove bias from the machine learning models. And one of the ways that we're doing that for our service providers and our enterprises is we don't look only at passive end user transactions, which we do, all transactions all the time. But we also inject synthetic models inside of the network infrastructure. And then our analytics platform brings the two together. And the combination of the two allows us to take the bias out of the learning systems. And we're finding that that's generating a lot of trust inside of the service provider environment in particular.
Tim, here's one direct for you. What are some of the major underlying networking trends that you're seeing in the support of digital transformation?
Thanks for the question, John.
Sure.
You have to think about kind of the goals of digital transformation, which is, I want to go faster. I want to go more efficiently. I want to improve my overall dynamics of the service provider, the enterprise, and the businesses and services I offer. Well, there's no digital transformation without an underlying network to support it. And so two key trends that we see that I just highlight here are disaggregation and openness. And to some extent, they clearly go together. And so, we started the disaggregation and the open journey in some ways all the way back at what we used to call and still call network function virtualization, where we're separating the software functions from the hardware, and we're building more solutions that have common hardware with software that we can install. We see that in SD-WAN and even BCPE type things today for enterprise services deployment. Well, that's also come to other aspects of the infrastructure, like disaggregated routing, where our goal is to provide a collection of hardware options for service providers with a network operating system that we can run on top of that. And so two of those key things I think I would highlight is open and disaggregated that's now coming to infrastructure near you.
All right. Well, Tim, let's focus for a moment on the optical networking a little bit more. Are similar trends happening in this optical networking space? If you think so, why?
Yep, good question and good follow too. So optical networking may have been, I'll just say slower in this regard. But what is happening is when you look at an optical transport type solution, one vendor was supplying all the pieces of that in a tightly integrated, package and solution. But the reality is that limits your pace of innovation and your pace of velocity, to the whole thing. And so what we've started to see, and it's been a trend for a number of years and is now picking up steam in service providers as well, is let's disassociate the transponder and muxponder type of function from the underlying optical line system. My analogy would be a highway and the cars that run on the highway. We don't have to supply the highway and the cars from one source. We can supply a highway and we can supply multiple cars to run on the highway, and we can supply different cars. And that type of open and disaggregation coming to optical is helping to increase the velocity and the pace of innovation of the transponder and the optical engine systems independent from the optical line system that underlies it, which results in more opportunity for service providers to deploy in a multi-vendor environment. So I can iterate what's happening with my optical engine technology at a different pace, 600 gig, 800 gig, future terabit per wavelength kind of engines. I can iterate that and introduce that into the network at a faster pace so that I can keep up with demand and economic pressure that's always present. And I can service this growing capacity that runs in the 30 to 50%, annual type of bandwidth growth. I can also create some more optimized network architectures, and overall, I can just improve my network economics, which is fundamental, right, to getting there. On the challenges side, anytime you disassociate or disaggregate, there's the potential that now I have to manage these multiple things, whether that's NFV or SD-WAN or now optical infrastructure. So open interfaces, common data models, and intelligent software automation have to be a critical part of that if you're going to make a kind of disaggregated and disassociated model work.
Good. Thanks for sharing a little bit more detail on that. And here's one for everyone. And why don't we start? We'll go to Matt and then Tim and then Richard. How about, I'd really appreciate if each of you could share maybe some lessons learned from your experience with customers going through their own, transformation journey. What would you say are some of the overlooked requirements for that successful transformation?
Sure. So, I think when you look at digital transformation, everything is really geared towards the company holistically, right? It's going to speak to leadership, employee buy-in, execution. And then when you get to the actual technology itself, I think the cloud gets all the press. But working at Infovista, I have a pretty deep insight into many domains, and I would say the network itself is probably the most overlooked. And the network is the glue that holds everything together. When you think of everybody working from home nowadays, or just remote offices in general, the cloud being out there, everything is done through online collaboration. It's going to be used by IT. You're going to have social interactions from other coworkers, and that's all done through the network, whether it be a local network or the WAN through connectivity services. With that in mind, the network is so valuable. The performance is obviously imperative, especially when we start to look at low latency services that 5G is going to provide. The healthcare industry has been impacted, and there's critical natures of data that are moving across the world. But the network, when you look at that aspect of it, it's also a critical point of failure. And it has to be assured. and I'm sure Richard, and Tim would agree just the same. Without that assurance level, the network could basically cripple the entire digital transformation process of a company.
Every digital transformation project is challenged by the idea of understanding, well, after we did it, is it actually better? So, one of the things that we've learned and we advocate for in our customer base is baseline, 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 iterate, baseline, iterate, baseline. It's really important. It's important not only from an efficacy perspective of the project itself, but it's also critical to the economic returns, right? So these transformation projects are justified on the basis of a business case. That business case, I would argue that high quality assurance solutions fit for purpose across all domains can bring back to any particular digital transformation project 5 to 10% of economic return. So really important. Second element, and I think this was discussed earlier, but I want to reinforce it. In the construct of anything that you put in the field or into your infrastructure, particularly in the construct of a highly distributed online collaborative workforce that Matt was pointing out, you have to have security first. And tying into something else that Matt said, the lowest common denominator, or the best thing that connects everything, is the network. So your security posture in digital transformation projects must be oriented around what we at Exedian like to call the last line of defense. When your endpoints get corrupted or your perimeter security is breached, your last line of defense is actually the most common binding element in your transformation projects and the way your workers work, which is the network. So have a security profile, an NDR, in the construct of watching the wire. And then finally, thinking about the evolution of that, much maligned, often devalued network. When you start to now look at what's that expression? A rising tide lifts all ships, or a sinking tide exposes a lot of mud. I don't know which one to use. It used to be, and if I just talk about 5G technologies for a second, it used to be that the access technology was so wildly unpredictable that nobody actually had to worry about what was happening everywhere else. Because everything else, compared to that access technology, essentially looked like an Ethernet cable. Well, with 5G, you've suddenly taken a radio interface and you made it look like an Ethernet cable. That has exposed all the issues in the rest of the networking infrastructure. Creates a big challenge for business transformation projects, and another challenge in terms of what the assurance and management model is for our customers.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing on that. Matt, what do you think are the critical factors to assure today's highly dynamic and complex digital economies?
Well, I would say Richard and Tim already alluded to quite a bit. I think we've talked to quite a few, and we can probably go on for hours speaking on that subject. But if I were to take three, right? If I were to distill everything that I work with, InfoVista is a full life cycle company, right? We look at solutions for the full life cycle of a network. But the three that I would pin it down to most so would be, I would say, automation, programmability, and being model driven. So if I dissect each of those through the automation means, it is the speed of where services work. It's going to be deploying a network slice in a 5G network. It's delivering a service to a low latency solution like a smart car or whatever it may be. Automation is absolutely critical. The programmability aspect is going to be very much in line with what Tim has been talking about. It's going to be that the decomposition of the networks and being able to program white labeled equipment or open box solutions that are speaking the same language, being able to have them interact in a very cohesive manner. And the third being model driven. So what do I mean by that? It's really sort of a task for the orchestration layers. It's creating service models, being able to understand an end-to-end, a very complex solution like a service that is being delivered, being able to create that in a logical sense. It's what drives things like closed loop automation. But those three key factors, they all need to be assured. They are critical for digital transformation. And I think if you were to take the summation of everything, you can boil them down into sort of those three key aspects.
Awesome. So automation, programmability, and model driven. All right, Tim, I'm going to give you one more, and we got to wrap some things up after this question. But Tim, looking at, I guess, the future network evolution, do innovation and commoditization both play a role? And if so, how do you think so?
We believe both of those are critical to the future and play really different roles. There's certain technologies and capabilities that, when matured, lend themselves to commoditization to get more scale or scope or volume or interoperability, as an example. However, commoditization, almost by its own definition, doesn't give you step functions in performance or step functions in economics or radically change the network or the way we're doing it. That requires innovation. And so two examples on the innovation side I would cite from Infinera or around our next generation i6 optical engine, where expectations in the past had been that the top headline rate of any optical engine would be a certain distance. And with our second generation Nyquist subcarriers and innovative kind of technology from our Optical Innovation Center, we're able to push that 4 or 5 times further than what expectations would have been from prior generations of technology. The other is something like point to multipoint optics, where we can finally match this set of traffic patterns from kind of one to many. We can finally match that up and have a high-speed laser talk to a low-speed over a multi-point optic capability. And that's a case where we can really change the network and eliminate and minimize some OEO conversions and intermediate aggregation points. Those are just two examples of how innovation can really step function the network and transform it in big ways versus what we can do with incrementalization and the commoditization.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. Well, we're going to wrap this up. So, Richard, final parting comment, anything you'd like to share quick?
I just want to, if I could do a clap, maybe I will, for Tim's comments. In the end, the existential threat for anybody who builds infrastructure these days is the advent of the white box. And to Tim's point, sure, you might be able to get incremental benefits when you do that, but the idea of service-aware infrastructure and innovation is where business models change. You don't Uber an industry by cost reducing your way there. And so, I applaud Tim's comments 100%.
Well, thank you. Again, Richard Piezentine, Chief Marketing and Chief Strategy Officer of Obsidian. How about yourself, Matt? Final comments for us.
Yeah, I think Tim and Richard bring up great points. I think we're all very close in the industry. We see a lot of the same trends, and what Tim was talking about with the white box. I agree with Richard. I couldn't agree more. When we look at this transformation, all of the companies that we work with, whether it be enterprise or CSP, they do have differences that they're looking for. But what has inevitably changed are different trends in the very short term. But we're still working with these companies that they have plans over the many years to deal with this transformation. And things may have been put on hold, things may have been accelerated, but all of us, Infovista, CDN, we're all here to really help that process, to assure that they are going to deliver those services. We work with the major vendors. Infinera is great out there. They are the experts in optical. So always happy to talk to others.
Excellent. Again, Matt Ringhofer, Director of Technical Services and Service Assurance of Infovista. Thanks for being with us. And finally, Tim, wrap us up, my friend.
Well, there's no digital transformation without a transformation of the network. that would be my kind of closing statement. And so we're all committed to transforming the network, helping service providers go faster, and using a combination of commoditization and innovation to take us forward and to build the kind of network we're all seeking. With that, I'll say thanks a lot for the opportunity, John and MEF and all of my peers here, Matt and Richard. A great job, great to be a part of it.